So I am an only child by birth. And so I don't have natural sisters, biological sisters. So for me, sacred sistering means a divinely orchestrated group of women who come alongside of one another to walk together. Different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different beliefs, different religions, even. But God has brought us all together to walk along in the way that He would have for us to go. So that's the sacredness of sistering. That bond pulls us into the activity of what the divine has for us. So the inspiration behind my devotional, it comes from Kings, where we talk about the woman, the widow, right, who is unnamed. So as so many women in Scripture, she has no name. What is listed is the city where she's from. All we know is that she's from the city, and that she's a widow, and that she has resigned herself to die. And so the inspiration behind that is in my role as executive pastor of a church, I oversee the various ministries in the church. So I see the women that work behind the scenes doing all of the things that need to be done to make the church world work as it should, right? So many of them come with their own struggles, their own issues, their own problems, but they come and they show up day by day by day. And some of them come and no one knows who they are. So when you see the finished work on Sunday or whatever the activity is, you don't know all of the people who operated behind the scenes. And so a lot of times these women feel alone, they feel left out, and they even, as they're working in the church and as they're following Christ, they feel abandoned. And so this is what inspires me. This is what, to speak to these women who operate in ministry, faithfully serving, but yet they have those moments in the days and in the nights where they feel like they are all alone, that nobody sees them. But this is just to encourage them that there's a God that sees them and has a plan for their lives. So my devotional comes from, the title of it is A Handful of Faith, Obedience, Sacrifice, and Promise. And it originates in 1 Kings 17, verses 8 through 24. And the little piece of the verse that I focus on, it says, "Bring me a little water, a morsel of bread in your hand," she said, "as the Lord your God lives." And she went and did it. So the prophet Elijah spoke to the woman and said, if you will do this, if you will bring me water, if you will bring me bread, then the God will do this work in your life, right? He will sustain you. And so for the women out there whose names we do not know, who God has sent someone in their lives to help guide them or to ask something of them, and they're struggling with that obedience, they're struggling with doing whatever is asked of them, I say to them, without knowing much of her background, it is apparent that she was alone. And even in her misery, God used her faith. God saw her. While Scripture doesn't have a name for her, God knew her. As the God of grace and God's master plan sent the prophet Elijah to a resourceful, faithful woman on the verge of death, we too can exercise our faith and receive rescue. In the spirit of God's daughters, we move in the faith of servanthood and the belief of God's promises. So in that spirit, we move. This is our handful of faith. So it is simply our obedience, our faith in who God is and what God has said, that we move and God rescues us along the way. I think women of color in ministry, I think this devotional will speak to their souls. The ups and downs of ministry. However, wherever you are working and operating in ministry, there are moments and there are times where there is doubt, there is fear, there is anxiety, there is hurt, there is pain, there's a gamut of emotions that you experience in ministry. Ministry will take you to the end of yourself. And so I think this devotional, from all of the women who've poured tears into this, I think that it will bring a great sense of encouragement and upliftment, and it will bring a sense of, I can go another day. And even as my grandmother would say, I can go a little bit further. And I think sometimes we simply need that one thing to touch us in the heart of our spirit, to say, I can go a little bit further, that we can make it through another day. And so I think that's the benefit and the beauty of a devotional such as this, by women of color, for women of color.